New York fashion designer Ralph Lauren once said, "I don't design clothes, I design dreams." The dream that you can be whoever you want to be, achieve whatever you want to achieve, be with whoever you want to be with. The American dream is incarnate in our clothes.
Let me tell you, you're making it work. You're making it work.
Every garment has a story. Every style choice has a purpose. And that couldn't be more true in the city that never sleeps, New York. But why should New York City care about fashion? There's 4 fashion capitals in the world: Paris, London, Milan, and of course, New York City. Let's weave our way through New York City, find out why the city that never sleeps is one of the fashion capitals of the world. Your grandfather?
Yeah, my maternal grandfather, Frank Fisher. Here's his name.
Oh, Fisher. What ethnicity was he?
Polish.
Polish.
Poland. Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. And he was a button maker.
No, he was. He sold trims and notions.
Oh, I see.
On a push cart.
By the 1880s, millions of Eastern European Jewish immigrants flooded onto America's shores. New York City experienced a huge influx of immigration to the point that the Lower East Side became the most densely populated place on Earth. You'll be lucky to see signs here in English or to find an empty street. In order to bring the history alive of the Lower East Side, I know just the perfect place.
The building was abandoned in 1935 and then left for 50 years. And then when the founders of the museum found the tenement, it was really like walking back in time. This apartment is a recreated tenement of the Levine family. The Levine family is from Poland, and they arrived in New York in 1890. Their apartment was both a place to live and a place of work, because they ran a sweatshop, a garment business, out of their apartment. Levines were a big family. It was Jenny Harris Levine, the mother and father. They had 5 children, added to by the workers they had. This is a very confined space and occupied by, 10 to 15 people at any one time. So, and things are going on. There's steam, there's hot iron pressing clothes, so it's hot, it's busy, it's chaotic, and it's quite an intense experience.
Hence the term sweatshops.
Exactly, yes.
It was a very hot apartment.
Yes, exactly. Right, ventilation. Unfortunately, people didn't have things like AC back then in the 1890s, so yes, things got incredibly hot. There's a stove, so Jenny was probably cooking food, and then at the same time there's the heat from the presses, the iron presses as they were making the garments. So just a mixture of just the amount of people and all the work that was going on. Yes, it would have been incredibly hot and I imagine quite stifling.
Yeah. '1860s America. Ready-to-wear clothing exploded in popularity, but why? 2 reasons. Sewing machines getting smaller and more affordable. In the Civil War, millions of measurements were obtained, mostly for men's and boys, kickstarting the first ready-to-wear industry. However, I headed uptown to LIM College to find out a little bit more about how this revolution got started.
Hello, I'm Sally Shapiro. I'm a professor of fashion merchandising at LIM College. When the Civil War started, there was an intense and immediate demand for uniforms. And at that time, everything was made to measure. Every individual had to have his body measurements taken in several places, neck, sleeve, back, waist, inseam, etc. But that would take too much time, and uniforms needed to be made quickly. So the government gathered a certain number of men and took measurements and took averages. The need for uniforms gave rise to size standardization, and that led to the first ready-to-wear. So for the first time, we are making clothes en masse. And luckily, sewing machine was invented by Walter Hunt. That enabled us to make uniforms very quickly to fit many men at one time instead of one-offs.
Which means that the Eastern European immigrant came at the right place at the right time. Because many of them were already textile and garment workers back in their homeland. This was their chance to make it in America. Hundreds of sweatshops opened up in this neighborhood. Mostly poorly ventilated, cramped, and very, very sweaty. Also, many high-class New Yorkers feared that disease would spread through these garments. The city imposed heavy regulations, and thus the sweatshops of the Lower East Side had to move to the lofts of Greenwich Village. 4:40 p.m., March 25th, 1911. Greenwich Village. At the 10-story tall Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, a cigarette was carelessly discarded onto a pile of scraps underneath a cutting table. More than 500 people, mostly women, were sewing and cutting away at garments. A fire erupted on the pile of garments, spreading to the wooden tables and the other garments. The garment workers were panicking. They had to get out, and they rushed for the exit, but the doors were locked. It was a common practice in the time to lock in the garment workers to prevent them from taking unauthorized breaks and stealing any garments. No one was letting them out. Dozens of women in the lower floors managed to escape through the stairways, but then the fire spread everywhere. While the building structure was iron and steel, the flooring was wood. The elevator wouldn't go up anymore. Desperate for an escape, women took their chances and jumped down the elevator shaft to their deaths. In total, 146 people died. 123 of those were women. It was the largest fire disaster in New York history at the time. With hundreds of pedestrians witnessing the horrors of this fire, the city was in shock, and the entire nation was in shock.
The tragedy, which was enhanced by the fact that when the fire departments arrived, and they were all independently owned at that time, when they arrived, their ladders, when they extended, were not tall enough to reach the floors where those women were hanging out and screaming for their lives, jumping to their deaths. The outcome of the tragedy led to several steps to ensure that that doesn't happen again, not only with the fire department having the equipment to reach tall floors, but also it passed several laws that are still enacted today, such as fire escape routes posted in buildings. Doors were no longer locked from the outside, and also it gave strength to the union movement, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union.
The garment industry once again came under the gauntlet of city regulations, demanding for these factories to be built fireproof, with large fire escapes and large windows, along with providing more humane working conditions.
It's eerie walking right by this building where this tragedy took place. The building still stands. It's no longer called the Ash Building, or definitely is no longer a shirtwaist factory. It's now the Brown Building in NYU. Ironically, in a maybe dark way, it's a chemistry department.
Sixth Avenue, between 14th Street and 23rd Street, Ladies Mile. From 1860s onwards, Ladies Mile was the premier shopping district of New York City.
This era was the birth of the department store, with places such as Macy's, Bergdorf Goodman's, and the department store that was the centerpiece of an Audrey Hepburn movie, Tiffany & Company.
Thousands of high-class women strutted along this stretch in Manhattan underneath the elevated railroad. However, next door in Fifth Avenue, garment factories were already opening. It benefited the garment industry to be right next to the shops, saving a lot of money on shipping costs. However, during lunchtime, thousands of male garment workers came out to lunch, spilling onto Ladies Mile. This scared many of the high-end clientele off. And as many of the shops started moving uptown, so did the garment factories move up Fifth Avenue, encroaching ever closer to the mansions around 50th Street. The high class of New York was up in arms, with the working class being right at their doorstep. Thus, a group of aristocrats, realtors, and high-end business owners posted a full-page ad in the New York Times reading, "Shall we save New York?" urging the city and the public at large to stop garment factories from moving northward on 5th, and in turn issuing a strong warning to garment industrialists that their lives would be made really hard if they chose not to comply. Most of the garment industry was owned and run by Eastern Europeans, who were still a minority in America. They had no choice but to seek to build their garment factories elsewhere. Thus, they set their sights on an area of New York that no one else dared to move into: the Tenderloin. Seventh Avenue, between 35th Street and 40th, 1921.
This area used to be known as the Tenderloin. It was the seediest place in all of New York City, filled with gambling dens, brothels, dingy watering holes, and lots of crime.
No upper-class lady or gentleman would dare find themselves wandering this area, unless if they were up to no good.
Luckily, that is no longer visible. The only remnant of that era is this church, the Church of Holy Innocents. But it shows how things transition, because after the 1920s, the Catholic religion really wasn't that popular in this neighborhood, because a lot of the immigrants that came over were Eastern Europeans and mostly of the Jewish faith.
In order to find out more about the immigrant history of this neighborhood, I found the perfect tour guide.
Mike Hayback is my name. I'm a licensed New York City tour guide. I've been doing tours of the garment district for over 20 years. I worked in the garment industry starting in 1964. I've been around for a while. These people who came from Eastern Europe in 1922, without these people, the 12 million people that came here between 1890 and 1924, without these, you couldn't make the clothing. So most European immigrants who came to this country from Eastern Europe, like my mother, my Aunt Ruth, my Aunt Gertrude, and my grandmother, Mamala, went into the garment industry. Yeah. How else would I have a picture like this? Yeah. It's my family.
The first two factories to be built here at the former Tenderloin was the Garment Capital Center in 1921, flanking 37th Street, when there really wasn't that much here around.
Ushering in the era of the skyscraper industrial building. In the course of only 10 years, over 130 garment factories were built here. By By 1960, 75% of all women and children's clothing sold in America was manufactured right here.
Menswear was still predominantly imported. There were some men's factories, but it was mostly women's wear. And keep in mind, we still had tons of immigration. In 1924 alone, 12 million people passed through Ellis Island. So the demand for cotton grew, the demand for finished apparel grew. And even though men were the first ones to get the clothing in the family, women started entering the workforce in these fields. And then you had your high society women. Again, the top-down theory, just like the Parisians and royalty, New York City had its wealthy families, the Roosevelts, the Carnegies, etc., and catering to that clientele also influenced lower-class women to desire fashion.
Fashion icons like Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, and Donna Karan all got their start here in the 1960s. Then designers coming from other cities came to 7th Avenue, like Oscar de la Renta.
All four of their offices were located in this one single building, 550 7th Avenue. Every single day you'll see limousines popping out, leaving off famous fashion designers, influencers, and anyone who is well known in the industry.
You're in New York, you meet all walks of life, and no matter what company you work for, they're all here. You know, every type, every character is here in New York, and it's a wonderful education.
That's so wonderful. Anthony Wong has had a long storied career in the garment industry for more than 30 years. She has worked with some of the biggest names in fashion, including Calvin Klein, where she tells us how it was working in that company during its heyday.
Yes. So by the time I got working with him, it was already big business, you know. I had the pleasure of working with him. I wish I could show you a frame I have that he gave me his autograph. It said, you know, to Leanne, your mom is most talented and of great help, Calvin Klein, you know. So of course I let her hold that for a while until I took it back. But, you know, he's an icon and he's known for his simple design. By then, we were the production company that produced and merchandised and marketed his jeans, his denim line. And so he was a design house and he would have different franchises or different companies do different products. There was another company that specialized in outerwear, and so they would produce all of his outerwear in whatever price range he needed. We were his jeans and underwear business, t-shirt, anything that went with jeans is what we actually produced for him. So we were his largest production office. But then of course he had handbags and he had shoes, and these were all done by different manufacturers, and he was like the octopus head and we were the tentacles, and that was his empire.
7th Avenue is as synonymous with fashion as Wall Street's synonymous with finance. That's one of the reasons why the fashion industry really thrived here in New York City. It was in close proximity to the financial center of the world, to the advertisement center of the world at Madison Avenue, and also to even the shopping center of the world at Herald Square.
However, within the neighborhood, there was always an ecosystem with stores for trimmings, wholesale clothing, and also fabrics.
In a very crowded garment district in 37th Street, I'm going up to the second floor of this building to meet up with the owner of one of the most famous fabric stores in the entire world, thanks to a little show called Project Runway.
2 minutes remaining. Anya, you're walking the wrong way.
Welcome to Mood Fabrics. I'm Eric Soma, co-owner of Mood Fabrics, right here in the garment district of New York City. So my father, Jack, he started Mood Apparel, which was our mother company, he was a garment designer back when he came to the US in 1976. But even prior to that, his family was in Sweden and his brother started a clothing line together, selling to H&M. And I remember my dad getting, well, I don't remember it, but him telling me he had his first order of 50,000 units, which was extremely big for them and large. So they capitalized on that and they kept getting more orders. And then my dad realized this is where I want to go, but I want to do it in the fashion capital of the world. So him and my mother came to New York, and that's where he started his big design dreams. And then one day, after probably 20 plus years, decided, I'm out of this business, I'm going into real estate. He had a new passion for real estate. I'm going to take whatever little capital I have left and I'm going to go there. Then realizing under his cutting room tables, he had all of this fabric. And he's like, you know what, I'll just call a couple jobbers, let them just buy it and I'll cash out and I'll leave and take my money elsewhere. And he realized, I just made more money doing this than I've ever made in my life. COD, cash on delivery. And he said, you know what, let me see if I can buy another lot of fabric. So he went and bought more fabric from leftover designers, was able to resell that pretty quickly, got his cash out, and then kept doing that. And he realized, okay, I found, you know, my niche, I'm gonna go into this. We're across the street from where we used to be, where we originated, and then we went to 39th Street, we were in 244 West 39th Street, then to 250 West 39th Street, and then now to 225 West 37th Street, where we've been for about 20 plus years now.
One of my earliest memories was going to the fabric store with my grandmother. She would usually make garments at home for the family. I remember just touching the fabrics and kind of feeling all the different type of textures and being in awe by how many variety of textiles there are. It's still awesome to see them around here in New York City.
7th Avenue was Fashion Avenue. It was the glitz, the glamour, the limos, and people walking out with big fur coats, and it was beautiful. And then you'd walk just an avenue over to 8th Avenue, and you would see the unpleasant side of New York City, which Giuliani cleaned up, and you saw a lot of women doing things they shouldn't have been doing. My brother and I remember being flashed a couple times, but and we would see, you know, drugs and things we shouldn't be seeing as, you know, teenagers on the streets, especially coming from Long Island. I remember bringing friends to the city. They're like, "This is what you're doing?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "This is so different than how we grew up." I'm like, "I know, but this is what we have to do." So we had a good time. It was a great experience. Back then, there were loan sharks out there. There was mafioso around. There was the real old school Garmento guys. They were tough guys. And I remember my dad would point out, like, that one's mafia, that one's a loan shark, that one is this, that one is this. And they all went to one deli that was on 38th Street at the time. And I remember my dad walking in there, and when you walk in there, you go there to do business. So every guy had a booth, and every guy had, you know, something to talk about. You talk to this guy for that, you talk to this guy for that, and it was an eye-opening experience. My dad's like, for the most part, you stay away from this place. Only if you really need something, you go here and you take care of business. Unfortunately, in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of people started doing production in China and the Far East, and we started losing a lot of business. A lot of the garment centers started shifting over. Year after year, you could see the transition. We joke around that we used to hate walking on the street with my father because literally he's a very lovable man. The entire world loves him, the garment center loves him. Same with my mom, but my dad, when he walks down a street, literally 30, 40, 50 people would stop us. "Jack, how are you?" and shake his hand. And he's a delight to be around, and people just love to know him, and he's a great man. So we used to hate walking down the street because we wanted to just get lunch and come back, but that would be like a 2-hour venture. But year after year, less and less people were here. So it became easier to walk down the street, but, you know, it's sad because you saw the garment district diminishing. It just spreading out. Some people going to Brooklyn, some people going to Queens, some people going to Jersey, and then the far west side of New York City, and the garment district nowadays is almost obsolete, unfortunately.
Immigrants came here from all around the world in order to seek a better life in America. However, in turn, they end up making 7th Avenue, the garment district, and the American fashion industry into a global empire, just like this guy over here. At its height, over 200,000 people worked in the garment district alone. Nowadays, it's but a mere fraction of that. So what is the state of the fashion industry right now?
I'm actually wearing blank NYC, a PU, faux leather. These are Free People boots.
Awesome.
And then this is a Zara jacket. It's my go-to. It's old, but I love it. It's nice and tailored, and it's smooth looking.
Now that we have learned about the history of New York City fashion, I went to the streets to ask real New Yorkers one simple question. What does fashion mean to you?
I think right now it means how I feel in what I wear.
Fashion really to me is like kind of a self-expression or putting on like a character and playing dress up, but as an adult.
Fashion means that I can express myself in any way I want to.
It's all just kind of a bunch of creativity and imagination in one.
Fashion's a way for me to kind of lift my mood. Anytime I'm feeling sad, I feel like putting on an outfit that makes me feel great, makes me start off the day on a right note.
Taking what's inside and wearing it outside, you know, making it physical.
Fashion for me is a way for me to communicate to the world around me without having to say much.
The biggest advertising screen that we wear every day, so we can vote for what we believe in with our fashion choices.
The fashion industry is transforming in New York. Technology, social media, and online commerce have paved the way for homegrown, independent designers to start up across the 5 boroughs. Let's learn about 3 such designers in Brooklyn and Queens and their experiences selling unique clothing directly to their customers.
My name is Tegan Lee. I work out of Bushwick, Brooklyn, and I design costumes and headpieces.
How does the process go for you designing a garment for a client?
So the process goes is they tell me what their vision is, what they want to make, and I'll sketch it out for them and measure them, and then we'll have them come in for a fitting after I sew it, and I pattern it and create it, obviously, and then they come in for a fitting and see if it fits well or not, and if we want to make any adjustments, we'll just change it up. The garment district is where I get all my fabrics for everything. They just have everything I can almost possibly dream of. And if it's not in the garment district, I do go online. But actually, one of my passions is also sustainability. So one of my friends just opened a shop in right near the garment district, which uses recycled fabrics from, actually it's not recycled, it's fabrics that the designers didn't use for the season, and now they're just they're not scraps, they're rolls that these designers would have just thrown right away, and my friend opened a store and selling it. So.
Oh, that's amazing. And have you met other designers that are in the similar design method as yourself?
So sustainability is a big thing for all of fashion right now, and there's a few designers I know out there, and some who have even worked. I've interned for some of them. So yeah, I mean, even though it's not my main thing that I'm only designing to be sustainable, I do love being sustainable.
Hi there, I'm Katya Lee, Brooklyn-based artist and a fashion designer.
So what are you making right now?
This is a jacket. It's made. It's kind of has a little bit of a futuristic / military vibe. I create crazy pieces, outfits, costumes, coats, really everyday wear for me, but people treat it as performance art. My pieces are pricey. Like this jacket it involved a lot of work. So someone from Lava Records purchased it for, not this one, the other one, for an artist. And it was expensive because there's only one like that in the world. Because it's my art. I never repeat pieces. When I make a coat, I'm never gonna make one again just like that. The pattern is always different. When I make it, I have no idea what is it I'm making.
So walk me through your process of how do you go from beginning from idea all the way to getting into someone's hands?
It starts with usually inspiration. Usually I see someone on the street or I hear something on the street. It always comes from outside.
Oh, nice.
And a color or a vibe, or like the next one I want to do is something to do with the Japanese samurai.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then
start drawing?
And then I sketch quickly so I don't forget. And then I go home and check in my closets whether I have enough of fabric for that, whether I have that specific one. Because to me, fashion is, you can get dressed as whatever you want. Like it's not school. We're done with school, so there are no limits. There's no dress code for me. I'm an artist, I can do that. And I can get dressed as a superhero or my alter ego and walk around, and not only I make people happy, I feel better. And fashion just never stopped. It's just, I had no idea how to make things. I knew how to design them. I had a seamstress who would tell what to do. And now I found myself in a situation when everything is different now. I don't have concerts every day, so I can't hire seamstresses whenever I want. So I just figured it out.
Hi there.
All right, thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course.
So your studio is located inside your home.
Yes, it is.
That's amazing.
Back this way. And we're in here. My name is Mallory Dunn. I'm the owner of Smart Glamour. I'm a designer, business owner, and professor. So as you're entering, I have my two main sewing machines that I use all the time. This is my serger, also known as an overlock machine, and this is a cover stitch machine. So this one is for the inside, and this is for the outside, basically. That's the easiest way to put it. Over here, I have a collection of items that are from our pop-up shops. So everything on the website is made to order, so I don't make it unless somebody orders it. But I do pop-up shops every once in a while, and so I create stock for them, and that's what these leftover pieces are. So I have all my threads here. Then next to it, that's like my little sleeve ironing board, and above my steamer and my iron, and that little fabric thing up there is called a ham.
Oh, I see.
That's for ironing like curved things, because it drapes around it. Then over here I have my just standard sewing machine. So this I mostly use for sewing on labels, buttons, zippers, those kind of like finishing things. Then over in this corner I have a ton of fabric. So some of this fabric I'm using continually for orders. And then I also believe in sustainability and low waste, so I keep everything that's left over. So on the table right now is a fabric I really love. So I like to use fabrics that are easy to wash and wear and go. They're comfortable, they're soft, they're not too expensive. So the things that I'm making end up not being too expensive because I really believe in accessibility. Yeah. So this fabric is called rayon challis. It's kind of like it feels like a lightweight cotton, but it's so drapey because it has rayon in it.
So it's a semi-synthetic?
Yes. Yeah, and I'm gonna make a pair of Edith pants out of that, which is a pant style from my site. It's kind of like a paper bag waist, like flowy, comfortable pant.
Wonderful.
And up here I have all my patterns. So they are organized by the product name and then the category. So tops, swimwear, skirts, pants, dresses, and then sleeves, and then like miscellaneous patterns. And I have I love a list. So I have lots of different notebooks where I take notes, where I do pattern math while I'm working.
Oh, just so everything stays consistent.
Right, so like this, for example, like this right here is actually a little pattern math from making a bralette. Because I don't have a specific pattern for every size I carry, because as you can see here, I have lots and lots of sizes. So for one product, I might have like...
That's a lot of sizes.
I might have like four or five sized patterns, and I'll pick the one that's closest and then edit it as I go.
I see.
Yeah. So sometimes I need to write notes down so that I know what I'm doing.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. This is Smart Glamour's Spring 2020 collection that just went live today on the site. If you are new to Smart Glamour, I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about us. This is our 6th year anniversary. We are a small independent business, and by we, I mean just me, because it's just me. And I ethically hand make all of these clothes. They're made to order when you order them online. Then I make it, then I ship it out, so we reduce waste. The models that you're going to see on this runway are most likely unlike any models you see anywhere else. They represent every shape, size, age, weight, height, ethnicity, ability, gender identity, all those things.
What struck me the most about Mallory Dunn was the level of work she puts into making her brand Smart Glamour as inclusive as possible. It was truly awe-inspiring sitting down with her and seeing the passion she has for making clothes in her home studio in Queens.
I don't only enjoy designing clothes, I enjoy making clothes. And there's a lot of designers who don't even know how to sew, you know? The fact of the matter is that in most design houses, each person has a portion of the design progress, and that's all they do. It's kind of like when you think about a sweatshop or a factory, there's one person who's just sewing sleeves all day. Like, they're not making a whole garment. They're doing the same stitch over and over all day long. And that's their job. Similarly, in a fashion corporate office, you know, there's somebody who's only doing prints. There's me who's like mostly doing emails and I do sketches. There's a technical designer who's doing the specs and the measuring and the fits, like the fit meetings. Everybody does a separate little thing. And for the most part, they don't know how to do each other's jobs. So like most designers who are just sitting there sketching, they don't really know how to make clothes for whatever reason. Maybe where they went to school, they focused on this, you know, or maybe they took a sewing class and they hated it. And so like they just took the minimum and then they stopped and they erased it from their mind. I studied fashion in high school, which I was very lucky to be able to do. Again, my idea was like, I'm gonna move to New York City and I'm gonna open a tiny little boutique with like twinkle lights and I'm just gonna make clothes and sell them. And then I got here and found out that that's not what the fashion industry is. Yeah. I just want to make things and sell them. I'm a maker. I like doing things with my hands. Like I don't want to sit behind a desk and sketch somebody else's thing and then not even ever see it again.
There's something beautiful about having a clothes that's made for you.
Yes.
That you feel like you're a part of and you belong to.
Absolutely.
And then wear it to the world and express your own unique personality.
Yeah, and that what you just said is what I love about fashion. And I also strongly believe that should be accessible to everyone. Mm-hmm. You know, there are some fashion brands who will say all day that like that's what they're about. You know, they're about uniqueness and self-expression and feeling great. And then they cut off the majority of the population when they stop at a large.
Yeah.
It's like you're about all that, but only for this percent of people. Like how do you match up both of those things in your mind? Especially if you're that person and you start voting with your dollars and saying, I'm not gonna buy my clothes at places that, you know, use sweatshop labor or just keep overproducing for the sake of it, you know. It will slowly shift. And I hope that the more people are aware of all of this, the more it will bring production back to our country.
Let's hope that Mallory is right, because garment manufacturing being close to designers is intimately tied to breeding new global brands. But what is New York City fashion? I sit down with Dennis Sarkozy, who's worked in high fashion retail for more than 10 years, and is currently a leadership and executive coach who regularly speaks about the role of clothing and style in our lives.
For New York City, I think it takes on a more distinct brand of utility, because New York City it requires so much of its citizens, and there's no escape from it and from the elements. That to wear something boldly is to be exposed, and to be exposed to other people and criticism. So at times it leads to a protectionism in that style in fashion of things like the gorp core, people wearing sleeping bags just to protect themselves from the elements of New York City. But at other times it is this magical way of rebelling against while fitting within and contextualizing within New York. But it can rarely be too fancy. It could rarely be too impractical because the city requires a lot. It is all but an obstacle course when you're getting out the street and on these uneven sidewalks.
Exactly. Taking the subway, walking through crowded streets, through different temperatures and weathers. Yeah.
And when I see someone wearing a very distinct fashion, I say that requires a lot because you are getting attention, positive or negative, but New York has negative attention in a way that many cities don't have negative attention.
Oh, fascinating. That's a very interesting way of thinking about it because New York City was the birthplace of sportswear, for example, and the jean became mass marketed here in New York City. So in terms of like New York City fashion, it's utility mixed with style.
And it happens so quickly. So it doesn't simply happen on the occasional gala. This is why we call it streetwear. It is literally on the streets every day. It is on people's way to and from work. It is publicly in parks. And because so much of the city converges on one another, unlike LA, unlike Paris, where there are these wonderful spaces to interact with it, but it's rarely in the subways with a jacket over it, carrying their heels in one hand.
Since New York City has been so influential on the global scene, especially with sportswear and streetwear, there's one final question we have to answer. So let's ask two fashion business professors and a fashion industry veteran. Will New York City stay a fashion capital?
Hi, my name is Dr. Gayatri Banavara. I'm a professor at LIM and I teach corporate social responsibility and marketing.
Do you think New York City is still the fashion capital?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yes, there are new venues, you can say, but New York City, absolutely. It can never change, at least in my lifetime. One of the main reasons which I feel attracts people to New York City is its architecture. And our president generally says, I mean, she has said multiple times, fashion is in everything. Yeah. And fashion is in architecture, fashion is on the streets, the locales, the people, everything. So you walk into New York City, there's a different feel. Everyone here has a sense of styles, has a sense of fashion, whether you are in the fashion industry or not. I mean, that's one of the reasons I love the city is I know, I mean, there'll be evolution and fashion, and New York City will change, absolutely, but it will still remain the fashion capital.
I know all of these young kids who are just starting at FIT or have gone to Parsons, and I meet them all over the city. They're so creative, and they're huddling, I noticed lately in Brooklyn. And I think the artistry is just so fun and so interesting and so intricate, and I think that New York attracts that.
There is still some production here. And I think with one of the social trends, because we have said that fashion is a response, one of the social trends is for sustainability in the supply chain and the fashion industry. So the fashion industry is the second largest polluter in the world. And a lot of that comes from either the dyeing of the fabric or the making of the garment. And then, of course, the disposing of the garment. The average lifestyle of a garment is 7 wears. So we're 7 times a consumer wears something. So it's very low. So it's unsustainable throughout the supply chain, from the fiber to the end use. There are plenty of designers and wholesalers and manufacturers who are looking to New York City once again to cut down on the excessive need of making a garment that is not good for the environment. So by working local, we're cutting down on energy, we're cutting down on some of the harmful effects of air pollution, shipping samples back and forth, or even the need for multiple samples. So I think there's going to be a little increase in local New York production again because of the increased consumer desire for sustainability in fashion.
Fascinating. For my final question, I interviewed a lot of small-scale designers, and I saw just seeing this in person and how they make the garment from design to giving it to the client inside their little studio, inside their little apartment in Bushwick.
Yes.
Gave me a warm feeling because I thought to myself, oh, this is how fashion really could be in an ideal world, where we get things fitted to ourselves in a way that's affordable. Might be more expensive than fast fashion, but affordable enough that we can have something that we wear way beyond 7 times. What do you see the role of small-scale designers here in New York City?
I think their role is going to be increasingly important. Again, it's going to be a response to what the consumer is demanding. Human behavior swings and business swings, and sometimes we go from one extreme to the next. So in terms of fashion, we went from, we'll go from wide legs, to skinny and, leggings and jeggings and yoga tights. And so it's very skinny. And, and now it's moving wider again. And we went from really low rise, and now the rise is coming up. Consumers were chasing the $5.99, $9.99 garment, cheap and cheerful, wear it once, throw it away. And we got to an extreme. And now Forever 21 was just sold. And consumers are saying, you know what, this is cheap, and cheap as in low quality as well as inexpensive. And I don't think I like that anymore. And I'm now aware of what that's doing to the environment. And I'm not sure H&M and Forever 21 and other fast fashion retailers are so cool anymore. And I think thrifting is kind of cool. And secondhand and Rent the Runway is kind of cool. And vintage and flea markets are kind of cool. And you know what? I think I want more local and I want more unique. And I think there's going to be a swing back, and there already is a swing back from that overconsumption, cheap and inexpensive, buy now, wear now, move on to the next mentality is going away. And that will require more individualized production, smaller scales, instead of making thousands and thousands of a garment and selling it at mass for very low margin. I think there's going to be a culling back to more exclusive, more curated, more individually tailored type garments. I think that's what the consumer is demanding now.
Fascinating. We're living in a brave new world.
I think it is. I think it's going to allow more creativity and innovation at the textile level, at the design level, at the production level, and at the retail level, whether it's brick and mortar or via Instagram. It's going to democratize, I think, what the industry is all about.
Oh, in a way, we're almost like reverting back to the days of Savile Row in the 1700s.
Yes, and the cottage industry. Yeah, we've gone from small and local to
designs.
Yeah, and we have new technologies that allow us to do things more efficiently and more effectively. And I think that's going to be to everyone's advantage.
Sally couldn't have said it better. Despite many speed bumps, New York City's more than 150-year-old fashion history is in no way stopping now. As we've gone on this journey to many different parts of the city and listened to the stories of people in the industry, one thing becomes clear, that New Yorkers know how to persevere amongst any challenge. The industry is definitely transforming, and along with that comes many growing pains. But one thing is for certain, that if history is any indicator and New Yorkers are any indicator, New York City will remain a fashion capital. Thank Thank you so much for watching this documentary about New York City fashion history. The reason I made it was because I tried searching for the history of New York City fashion on YouTube and couldn't find any video that talked about the entire history. So I decided to make one for myself and for all of you. So big thank you to everyone who I interviewed, to LIM College for giving me access to their professors and their library, to Mood Fabrics for letting me film all around the store and telling me your story, and to all the New Yorkers that I featured who were so fashionable. And also, if you want to see full cuts of the interviews that run 30 to 40 minutes each, you can become a patron or a Facebook supporter by going to patreon.com/urbanist or going to Facebook and clicking that Become a Supporter link on the Urbanist page, and there you'll get access to the full interviews. Also consider supporting the Tenement Museum. They're going through rough times because of this crisis that we're going through, and they could use all the support that they can get. So go to tenement.org and see how you can help them out. And also consider visiting these stores or shopping through them online, especially during this crisis or after this crisis is over, so we can continue having the fashion industry thriving here in New York. I'm Ariel with Urbanist. Thank you so much for watching. Keep being awesome and always keep on exploring. Have a great day, everyone.